first, I want to do a shout out. My brother hooked me up with some cool swag. The SM58 on 5/8 of this month had its celebration. It's a microphone that has been around since the 1960s, and a lot of bands and people record with these things all the time. They're high-end microphones. The SM58, my brother works for this awesome company, and they hooked me up with this this shirt. Nice swag. Thanks a lot. Appreciate that. Now to the Wandering Earth. I finally had a chance to see it, and I really, really enjoyed it, okay? I'll tell you the things I didn't like and then the things I really liked, but there's not much that I didn't like. The first thing was Netflix, because they aired it here in the US, they gave us a dub. I was fully prepared to read subtitles and hear the movie in Mandarin. Not a big deal for me. Sometimes dubs have a tendency to kind of put people off. I understand why they did it, because they took this movie that has made 700 million plus worldwide, and they're bringing it on Netflix to everyone, and they weren't sure if people would be able to get into reading subtitles. I don't know. You look, here's the deal. Anytime movies are shown overseas that are American, they're always done with subtitles and things like that too. Why the American audience is always pushing back on subtitles and hearing things in other people's native tongue is beyond me. But I'm also somebody that worked in anime for a long time, did a lot of voice work on dubs with animations, which is, it's a little different because you can work with it a little bit more. When it's humans, you can't really match the mouth flaps with the American dialogue, so it always looks a little off. And sometimes the actors who do the dubs later on go a little overboard with a lot of the dialogue and things like that, and it's not as subtle as maybe it would be in their own native tongue. But now I'll digress. We'll get back to the Wandering Earth. First of all, it's based on a book. I did a trailer review about this. I actually went looking for it to see if it was in the theater, but it was in select theaters here in the US, so it didn't make it to my neck of the woods. So here I am. I finally get to see it. I'm kicking back, and I'm just enjoying it. First of all, they do a lot of exposition in the beginning. There's narration that just like is dumping information on you right off the bat to kind of explain where we are, why we've lost our son. It's slowly fading. All the leaders got together and they formed this brand new type of government, and they're all tasked with creating these earth engines that are placed all around the earth, and basically like the droid in the first Star Wars film where Luke is doing this, and it's following him and he's blocking lasers. This thing can kind of push itself. So now it's like that. So the Earth can just kind of go where it needs to go, and it has to find a new sun. And, you know, some people were like, oh, the physics are off, blah, 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 blah. This wouldn't really work, blah, 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 blah. And you know what? This is no different. This film is no different in logic and in science and stuff like that as other big blockbuster movies like Armageddon and things like that. So you right off the bat, like the story, you have to have a suspension of disbelief, and you have to just go on this ride and roll with it. And I did. I enjoyed it. All of the acting was good, and in a lot of Asian films, especially China, sometimes there are characters that are really over the top. So you've got your comic relief characters that are really over the top, dramatic, you know, to play against all of the really dramatic parts of the film. There was a lot of kooky characters like that. Right off the bat, this is a father-son story. Now, I never read the book, the book that came out. I think it's a series of books. But this is a father-son, grandfather film, okay? So the drama is all surrounded by this father that has to leave his son as 4 years old and go up to an international space station to help coordinate this entire thing that's going down. He leaves him with his grandfather on Earth. And so right away, the son's really not happy about it. The mother had a terminal illness, and of course, people that are, it's almost like in the movie Deep Impact. There was a lottery. Some people won the lottery to be able to survive and to go into the underground cities. Because once the sun disappears around the Earth turns into an ice cube. And so everyone is forced underground in these subterranean cities, and all of the above ground cities just freeze. And you know, they show a lot of Shanghai, and it's basically in 80 stories of ice. So all of the buildings, all of the roads, the bridges, everything is encased in 80 stories of ice because the earth froze. And so, you know, in order for them to go out on the surface to either maintain these Earth engines, they have to wear spacesuits, you know, thermal suits that keep them. If the glass breaks, forget it. They freeze, the hypothermia comes in, and then they just start freezing until they like are so frozen, if you touch them, they'd crack apart, like the T-1000 at the end of Terminator 2 Judgment Day. So all of these people, so it's about this family, and they're on a journey. Right away, they want to. They're stuck in these underground cities, so of course they like to play hooky, and so they get a hold of a couple of suits, and their idea of fun is to going up to the surface and exploring and seeing what's out there and getting away from the world they live in down below. But what they don't realize is there's a lot going on up on the surface as this Earth is going through space. So the idea was it was going to use the Earth, was going to use the gravity from Jupiter and be slingshot, kind of like the Apollo missions, where you use the gravity from the moon to slingshot you back around to get you back to Earth. Same kind of situation like that. But what happened was it got too close, and the gravity of Jupiter, because it's a giant super gas giant, started sucking the Earth into a slow descent where it was going to destroy the planet and burn everything up. So of course chaos ensues. Everybody's trying to figure out what to do, and they need to propel themselves away. Meanwhile, up in space, in this space station that's kind of, it's almost like the leader of the pack. It's flying forward and the Earth is behind it. This space station has every living organism on it. It's like a backup plan. So it's got all the great scientists are on board in a hypersleep, and there's only a few people that are awake to do maintenance. They've got seeds from every plant. It's like Noah's Ark. They've got animals on it. They've got all the DNA from animals. So basically, if their plan with Earth trying to get to another sun just implodes and doesn't work, this Noah's Ark of a space station can keep going and find an inhabitable planet, land on it, release all the DNA, release the seeds, and start a new Earth. And maybe in 1,000 years, humans would be populating again, and they would basically be kissing goodbye to 10 billion people on planet Earth. Because at this point in history, there's about 10 billion people on the planet. A big percentage did freeze to death. Maybe 2 billion people, I think I remember hearing in the film. There's a lot of these cool guys that are like rescue guys, and they have these exosuits, which are pretty badass. And it was funny, I was just at work the other day talking to somebody about this exosuit that I saw that people can wear, and then they can get into a squatting position and sit and be at a computer, then get up and then do work and then sit back down, and they could keep this exosuit on. But like many animes, mangas, all that, you put a guy in some sort of an exosuit, it always looks great. The film looked great, all the tech looked great, and you know, there were some people that said some of the visual effects weren't as good in places in the movie. I thought it was even keel across the board. I thought all the visual effects, the digital matte paintings of all the surroundings were great. I thought the exosuits were great. I thought all inside the all-terrain vehicles that transported the cores that they could repair the Earth engines with, they were badass. All of the CGI looked great. It was light years ahead of anything that's been on Sci-Fi Network, and I would say this is just as good as what they're cranking out at Weta Digital and ILM. I mean, the Chinese did a great job with this film as far as the visual effects go. So that never pulled me. I was never pulled out of the movie because it looked weak in one spot or didn't look weak in another. I just was never pulled out of the movie. So I will say that Again, I'll digress. There's a father, there's a son, there's a daughter, there's a grandfather, and my only thing story-wise that pulled me a little, I was like, was that there was this grandfather, and they were in a Shanghai building, and there's some spoilers. I'm going to spoil things when I'm talking, so just get used to that. But there was a scene where the grandfather was falling, and this rescue guy in an exosuit, grabbed him by a cord and was trying to hold him on and flung him through some open elevator doors into another level. And they were all about saving the grandfather's life. That was a big theme in the beginning. You got to save my grandfather. You got to save my grandfather. But then once the grandfather, this big dramatic rescue where they save him, where he could have plummeted 79 stories to his death, he gets slung in to some open elevator doors, and he lands on another level. But then there's some explosion or something happens, and then his suit messes up, and he ends up sitting down in a chair and taking off his helmet, and he freezes to death thinking about his life and all this other kind of stuff. And they did these really cool flashbacks when certain people would die. They would go into their life and stuff like that. But to me, that sucked, because they spent all this effort trying to save the grandfather just for his suit to run out of oxygen, and he sits in a chair and takes his helmet off and freezes over. And I felt really bad, because I understand that you need to have loss, but they already had loss. Like the grandchildren already had loss of their mother, who couldn't be saved and had a terminal illness. The father had to make a decision to let her go and go off into space and leave the kids behind. And so there's a lot of loss, but the grandfather played a critical role in that. The kids stole his little passport that lets him drive the big these big earth-moving, vehicles with 8 wheels on each side that haul the earth engine cores in them. And they needed that. That was a huge part. And then when the grandfather finally came back in before he passed away, he was able to drive these things and everything. And he was it's an integral part. And so to see him get taken out after they rescued him, I was like, oh, that's why would you do that? You get this guy and you finally think he's safe, and then you kill him. But that's just how the movie rolled. I love the camaraderie between the father and this Russian cosmonaut that was up in the space station. They had a good camaraderie there. And of course, the Russian sacrificed himself when the AI that was controlling the ship that was going, it was like Noah's Ark, that was following in front of Earth. Basically, it was like HAL in 2001. It was like an eye that just looked at everybody. And, in respecting what it was doing, it was only following orders that nothing could jeopardize if the Earth was going to plummet into Jupiter, which this was one of the scenarios that you find out later that the computer had simulated, and that an Israeli scientist had said there's a chance that it could happen, and you might have to blast off of it and all this other kind of stuff. You find out that they knew that this was a possibility, that it could get sucked into Jupiter's gravity and get destroyed. So the AI, which was on this ship, could not jeopardize anything that would hurt the humans or the seeds or the DNA of all the animals and all that, because its main goal was not to protect the Earth. It was to protect what was in the ship. So you kind of had to sympathize with it, because the father who was on the ship was trying to override the ship's commands so that it could do things. And, it kept saying, no, you can't do it. No, you can't do it. So him and this Russian astronaut, cosmonaut, they get off, and they're trying to go to different hatches and get inside to kind of override the AI. But in the end, the AI was kind of right. You had to, it's almost like Thanos, with the Avengers Infinity War. His goal doing the snap was to take half of all the Earth's population and get rid of it, because in his mind he was saving Earth because they didn't have enough natural resources to feed everybody and all. Same thing with this AI, this HAL kind of carbon copy. He just wanted to preserve Earth. And so it was really cool. All his technology, how he came down and the eye looked around, everything, all top notch. I mean, right out of some manga. you know, and so anyway, it goes on and on and on. There's constant trials and tribulations. People are dying left and right. Explosions are doing this. They finally come up with an idea to turn one of the Earth engines, because it's being sucked into the gravity of Jupiter, into a giant, they take all the energy into these giant plasma streams, and because, you know, again, you have to suspend, you know, your disbelief on this, a plasma ray from these Earth engines to go down like 20,000 kilometers into the atmosphere of Jupiter, because Jupiter's a gas giant. So they want to ignite this huge explosion of hydrogen gas, which is what, like 75–80% of what Jupiter's surface or surrounding clouds are, which would be enough force to push the Earth away from Jupiter's grasp and get it going where it needs to go. And so, of course, you know, there's a lot of last minute craziness that goes on. You think it's going to end, you think it's going to fail, they save the day, then it's going to fail again, then they save the day. It's just on and on and on and on. There was a really beautiful moment where the father's talking to the son who's down there trying to rescue and save everybody, and he's telling him he loves him and that he knows he left him at 4 years old. He's been in the space station. He wanted to reconnect with him on Earth when they got to a safe star and all this kind of stuff. And he starts to cry. And as he's crying, the tears are coming down, and then because he's in zero gravity at that point, because he had to shut off, you know how all of these kind of space stations spin like this to keep gravity going? Well, he had to disengage from that, so then everything starts floating. So he's crying in this really dramatic scene, and the tears start going off of his face, and it looked real. It looked really good. They did a really great job with the visual effects on this, and for someone to think of something simple like that in zero gravity when somebody cries. So not only was his eyes welling up with tears, which was really, really sad, they're just going off into the distance and in this ship, and that was an emotional moment. It really was. And so my hat's off to the director and for putting that in there. And then of course, you know, they get away from Jupiter's grasp. The Earth has been kind of burned all on one side, so they have to go to the other side. But here's the kicker with this whole movie. So it was a 100-year mission to get everything to Jupiter, okay? And with the space station and everything, but now they're back on course. They can rebuild the space station because most of the arc was still left up in the atmosphere, because he just, basically the father just took the fuselage with all the fuel. He needed all the fuel to get this plasma one last burst to get down to 20,000 kilometers. And make a long story short, because this is a long video, but you could see I'm really excited because I really enjoyed this film. So, but basically, it's going to take them another 700 years, 4 light years away, to get to the next star to see if they... So all the people that did all this sacrificed everything, and they're not even going to make it to where Earth is going to end up. 700 years to get there. Then it's going to take another 2,000 years, or a total of 2,000 years, 1,000 years to... When they get to that star, they have to put all the engines, like, in reverse and slow the Earth down to get it into an orbit. So like this whole thing takes place over 2,000 years, but we only saw a small snippet, a small moment as it passed Jupiter. We didn't see the first 100 years. They kind of recapped it, like I said, with a lot of heavy narration in the beginning. But the thing is, they can make more sequels of this, you know, because the underground cities had all life of their own. They had their gangs, they had their drug dealers, they had their prostitutions, they had their celebrations, they had their families, but not just the people in like underground Shanghai. We're talking all over the world. You literally could make sequel after sequel after sequel of this film if you wanted to, because there's a long journey to get to that next star. But for what this was, it was really good. I really had a great time with it. My hat's off to everyone that made this film. All the actors did a fantastic job across the board. Again, it's just, there were some beautiful moments in this movie. The tears, You know, and oh, and one more thing before I forget. Oh my God, the all-terrain vehicles that they're hauling around the Earth engine cores in, they literally are controlled by holding a sphere, which I had not seen that in any other movie, I think, up until this point. And so you literally rolled this sphere around to drive it left and right and go like this, and all the wheels would work in unison. So that was a really cool thing, because again, that would be very difficult, and I'm sure, you know, and that's why the grandfather was really trained in this, and the grandson was learning how to do all this. But in the end, it all turned out really cool. But yeah, spherical steering wheel was badass. But anyway, that's it. Look, I had a great time with this movie. I'd probably watch it again, because I'm sure with all the things that went on, there were some things that I missed. I wished it would have been in Mandarin and subtitled. That would have been fine with me. But this movie overall, I give it an A. Go see it. If you can, stream it on Netflix. The Wandering Earth. What a roller coaster ride. Congratulations, everybody involved. It was good stuff. And once again, the SM58 microphone, kicking butt. I'm plugging the shirt. That's it. Well, my brother gave me the shirt. I got to plug the shirt, okay? It's awesome. Thanks a lot, and we'll see you on the next video.